Cami Knight's here in the studio. Good evening to you, Cami. Google is facing its heftiest fine yet.
That's right. It's a number that's difficult to say or even conceive.
Have a go.
It's so high. It's Russia that's fining Google the equivalent of $20 decillion. That's 20 billion, trillion, and involves a lot of zeros, 34 to be exact, a sum much greater than the size of the world's total GDP. The gargantuan amount stems from Google's refusal to pay fines for blocking pro-Russian channels on YouTube. State news agency TASS says the fine doubles every day it's not paid, hence why it's reached such unfathomable levels. Even the Kremlin's spokesperson struggles with the figure and says it's largely symbolic, but that Google should take it seriously nonetheless.
Although the amount is a specifically formulated amount, I can't even pronounce the number. The amount is full of symbolism. These demands actually just demonstrate the essence of the claim regarding our Google channels. Google should not be limiting the actions of our broadcasters.
After Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Google cut back some of its operations in the country but didn't pull out altogether. In quarterly earnings published this week, the company referred to, quote, ongoing legal matters relating to its business in Russia. Google may be one of the world's wealthiest companies, but this is certainly not a fine it can afford. E-commerce giant Temu could also be facing a hefty fine soon after the EU launched a probe into the Chinese company, saying the company may not be doing enough to stop the sale of illegal products. The platform is extremely popular in the EU, despite only being launched on the continent last year, with 92 million monthly active users now. In addition to issues with illegal products, the investigation will go into the site's, quote, potentially addictive design, which can have negative consequences on the physical and mental well-being of users. Take a listen.
If the suspected breaches include the sale of illegal products, the potentially addictive design of the service, the recommended systems of Temu, as well as data access for researchers. If these suspicions are proven correct, the Commission could decide to impose a fine going up to 6% of Temu's global annual turnover.
Temu says it will cooperate with authorities. And the launch of the probe comes as new figures show the massive inroads Chinese e-commerce has made in the European market. The CEO of the French Postal Service spoke Tuesday at a Senate panel where he told lawmakers that just two Chinese platforms, Shein and Temu, now make up nearly a quarter of packages delivered in France. Low-value imports generally exempted from customs fees, which has helped spark a massive fast fashion e-commerce phenomenon. NGOs and Western governments, though, are now sounding the alarm on the environmental and consumer protection grounds. Brian Quinn reports.
A Chinese e-commerce boom felt keenly in France. At a session of the Senate's Economic Affairs Commission Wednesday, the chief of the French Postal Service outlined just how big two platforms in particular have grown in recent years.
Temu and Shein now account for 22% of our packages in Europe. 5 years ago, that was less than 5%.
La Poste says Chinese e-commerce makes up an even bigger proportion of packages in France than in the rest of continental Europe. Launched in China in 2008, Shein has since become emblematic of the worst social and environmental excesses of fast fashion, cranking out an endless variety of low-quality clothing at breakneck speed, selling it at rock-bottom prices and shipping worldwide, usually with no customs fees. NGOs have decried the exploitation of workers in textile factories and the use of potentially dangerous chemicals that are often banned in Europe. Similar problems are also found at Shein's main competitor, Temu. The site sells not just clothes, but also toys and housewares, some for just a few cents. In recent years, a flood of low-value Chinese imports has overwhelmed Western customs controls. In the U.S., streamlined duty-free import laws have been blamed for easing the influx of chemicals used to make the synthetic opioid fentanyl. At the end of September, 6 EU countries asked the European Commission to crack down. Brussels has since demanded proof from Shein and Temu that they are following EU consumer protection laws.
Let's take a quick look at the day's trading action now. European markets closing lower this Thursday, ending the month with their steepest loss for a year. Both Paris's CAC 40 and Frankfurt's DAX closing down more than 1%. It comes after data released today showed that inflation in the Eurozone rose to 2% in October, higher than the 1.9% expected by analysts. Over in the US, meanwhile, stocks also slid, the Nasdaq leading losses as investors weighed disappointing earnings reports from tech companies including Microsoft and Meta. The final pre-election inflation reading also dropped this morning. It showed that inflation broadly continues to cool, as it has done for the past 2 years, prices climbing just 2.1% compared to a year earlier. It's good news for the Fed and for Kamala Harris, but whether she can turn that into impact is another story. Sentiment remains relatively downbeat, with the majority of voters still saying they're displeased with the state of the economy. Americans may not be happy about prices, but that isn't preventing them from spending a frightening amount for Halloween. The holiday has transformed from a pagan feast to one of the largest consumer spending holidays in the US, haunting even Christmas. This year, consumers are expected to spend $11.6 billion, up from $3.3 billion in 2005. That's an average of $103 per person. And according to the National Retail Federation's annual survey, 47% of consumers began shopping for Halloween before October even started. It's what's known as the Halloween creep, where retailers capitalise on the trend by extending the shopping window and turning a single-day celebration into a season-long retail event. At Home Depot, for example, Halloween sales were so successful last year that it even started celebrating halfway to Halloween with an online sale in April. Hype has definitely not felt as much in France. A recent study even showed about 2/3 of French people didn't even consider it was an important holiday. So don't think we'll be celebrating Halloween in April anytime soon.
Yeah, Cami, thank you very much indeed. Cami Knight, the ghost of business, past, present and future. We'll be back in 1 hour's time with more, as I will after a very short break. Stay with us.